There we go. All right. Okie dokie.
This is like a classroom right here.
Yeah, totally.
It's great.
Nobody's in their seats. They're all talking.
Clap once if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Somebody's making
yeah.
out in the kitchen.
I mean, yeah. What are you guys doing back there in the kitchen? Oh, there's already a question. Yes, you can go to the bathroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, phones are out. I don't have my phone sign right now. Well, not that they listen anyway. That's realistic too.
Dillon, how about the kids like Travis?
Oh yeah.
Junior and senior year, he's never had a date because there was no prom, there was no.
Oh yeah.
No school
No, we could talk about that.
I mean.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They go off to college.
Well, it sounds like just like me, except I didn't have that excuse, Betty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the other side is the mask from the perspective of people who are maybe not the most physically attractive. Especially if you think back to your high school self.
Acne.
Did you have acne? Did you have braces? Like I had braces? Did you you don't want anyone to see your mouth. And so now, you had an excuse, but then the problem is that this term became mask hot. Or someone would be like, man, I think that guy's cute. And then they take off their mask, like, no! It's over. So you have this whole, yeah, exactly. Just keep that on. Or the poor guys trying to grow facial hair.
Oh,
It's like the little poof that's there. Oh! I literally had to go up to one. It's like, man, can you get rid of that? Like, I got some solid intel that some people like you, but you gotta stop trying whatever that's going on. That caterpillar, and the next day he was like, he had it gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you're like me, around 32 is when you'll be able to grow facial hair.
Yeah. When you can rent a car at least.
Yeah, totally.
26?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm not going to give much of an introduction. I'm just going to say this is something that I hope to do over the course of the year intermittently. I mean, it's not going to be many weeks in a row type thing, but Dillon and I chatted literally 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Dillon was like, dude, I gotta speak to the congregation about what it's like to be a high school teacher right now, or just a teacher in general.
Yeah.
And I was like, 2 weeks, man. And he was luckily cool enough to say, yeah, that'll work.
Well, I was like 9/11. That'll be easy to remember.
Yeah, totally. That's a tough date to forget. But hopefully we'll have stuff like this over the course of the year. I mean, maybe Dillon will want to come back again, give us a 6-month update.
Yeah.
But also, was last year, 2 years ago, Stephanie talked about the work that she's doing. So she's going to come in and do some stories from the community. And then I'm actually going to actively seek out other folks. So this will be something that occurs. Yeah, it'll be a series, but not really a series. It'll be an infrequent series.
Not enough to have a sponsorship.
Not enough to have a sponsorship. Although maybe I can start looking for people.
Yeah. One of those podcast sponsorships everyone always hears. The same ones.
Yeah, those don't exist. Anyways, this is Dillon. You know him.
I hope so.
Yeah, he's a teacher at Milwaukie High.
Oh, way to give away part of the spoiler.
Oh, sorry.
No more.
But where were you? You were at some place else.
I'll
before.
talk
Okay,
about it.
go for it. I'll get out of your way. Yeah.
You're a fan of that one, huh?
Oh.
Sorry, that joke blew. It'll cycle through. We'll get another one. Sorry, I was a little bit above your head.
Unfortunately, your ideal audience is literally right here.
Yeah.
Dillon, I just thought, I was thinking of some people who've been teachers here.
Yeah.
And you're talking to some long-time teachers.
Yeah, raise your hand if you've ever worked in a school.
High school teacher.
You've been subbed in. High school teacher?
Yeah.
Okay, this is perfect. This is perfect. This is part of my inspiration. I think I'll sit down with you two to just sort of make this more informal.
I can get you a stool.
Stool softener? We might need that. Hello.
Hi.
The first thing that comes to mind.
You still have a smile on your face, and it's
It's
been a week.
been 4 days. I don't know if it would have been 4 o'clock on Friday. No, you gotta. It's like I say, when you're sick, you become a caterpillar, and the disgusting nose running, throw everything, and then you end up hitting the metamorphosis where you get the caterpillar stage where all of a sudden everything's super clogged up, but you're about to burst and to be a butterfly again, hopefully. That's teaching. It's just Friday to hopefully Sunday. Just enough time to have to go right immediately back. No, I was thinking about how the last time I was here, literally, was for a game of May I. You all remember May I?
Yeah.
I hope we play it again someday.
I do too.
One of the fears and worries I've had during this whole period has been how many people are going to be left who even know what May I is by the time we can safely play, and then how many of those people are going to be able to play and want to play. So I'm just going to take a mindful gratitude for all the people who led that game for years who are no longer here, or who maybe are still here but not here. Yeah, that night we had a surprise baby shower for Ellis. It was, I was overcome. We were all overcome with this beauty and warmth and gratitude for the community. And then that was the only baby shower we got to have.
Oh.
It was supposed to be the first one that kicked it off. We had this huge one. We had family flying over from all over the country. You know Kaya, she's putting together all the details, all the organization, 3 levels of RSVPing, just so excited. And then it got canceled, and I remember we thought, because that May I must have been like February of 2020, or maybe very early. And Ellis was born. You can always remember Ellis's birthday by remembering COVID, all right? We're a little teaching historical here. So COVID, how many letters are in COVID?
6. 5.
6 out of every 5 people have trouble with fractions.
I should just learn to keep my mouth shut.
5 letters. So she was born the 5th month. The COVID 19th of the month. So May 19th, and in the year of our COVID, 2020. So if you just remember COVID, you'll always know Ellis's birthday for the rest of the time. And by then, it was a different world. And we thought, oh, this is actually maybe better. We're trying to pump ourselves up. By the fall, it could be like a meet the baby. It's even more fun than prepping for the baby, getting to meet the baby. And then fall came around, and we thought, maybe spring, it'll be up more, she's not going to be sleeping, more interactive.
Thank you for the online pictures. That was so much.
And that is something that I've heard a lot from, that I took as like a calling, like no one can see her, so I can upload pictures and videos, and I have gotten so many people who said they felt like they've still been able to see her grow up.
Yes.
But when you saw her today, she just got fully vaccinated a few weeks ago. We could finally get her here safely. And that has been such, if you know anybody who's had a young child, even through all the vaccinations that the rest of us got, it has taken so long to get one that's Corona 5. And we're so grateful for that. But that's, her entire life has been since I was here. She's like literally embodies this period of time that we have not been able to be here together. It's special, but it's heartbreaking. And as part of that, I'm sure you all know in stories from your family members, from the news, has been trying to teach over this time. Think about the baby shower. The same thing happened with teaching. It was March of 2020, and it was initially, I remember joking at work. I was literally like, man, we got screwed on snow days this year. We did not get one snow day. And I remember looking at my alternative kids in Oregon City, and I always had the toughest, most brutal kids that I just loved with my whole heart, that drained the soul out of you every second that you're trying to give them love. Those who have been teachers know the kind of kids we're talking about. And these are whole classes of just those like 2 or 3 kids in most classes that drive you insane. Or as I, from a friend who I'm going to meet up with next week as a teacher, she said, yeah, things are going so much better this year, but I've got this group of 5 freshmen that I really just want to open an airlock in deep space and then just watch with a cold stare as they just sail out. Because again, those who are teachers will relate to that. Like, you can love everyone, and it is harder to love people who will. There's that quote I have in my room: "Hurt people hurt people." And they're trying to constantly have empathy for those that are inflicting pain and chaos at all times.
It's hard for kids that are being hurt to understand.
But it's really hard for kids, and it's hard for us who are cared to protect everyone when we see this harm happening. Similarly, it's very hard to have a 2-year-old child who last night I was like crying, laughing as we were like putting her to bed because I just thought of the SNL sketches that should be done. I should just be in writer's room. You should either have like the adult who's the 2-year-old or just the 2-year-old, because 2-year-olds are like the most brilliant, cute, adorable terrorist demons that go
Wait
back.
till 3.
And I've heard about the 3-nager, but she's advanced. She's been verbal since 18 months, so I think we've just had the 3 preview. Because it's like she's reading a book and she's going, "Good night, bunnies on the farm." She knows bunnies on the farm. "Good night." "Where's my Patsy?" "It's over there." Okay. She's got it. And then we say goodnight to the sun. "My water!" "Okay, you've got your water. We're all good." And that is the same way with teaching. But you have sometimes 20 of them, 25 of them in a class. 45 in a class. And the ones that I taught, it was literally an alternative school, like New Urban in North Clackamas. Schools that exist to just try and take the toughest ones, that many of them have no love in their lives, from parents, from society, nothing. And they arrive with that coldness, 80 years of life by the time they're 14. I had a student who, just yesterday, I witnessed like cuss out a teacher to her face, just brutal after school. And I was there to try and stay empathetic and stay firm and let them know that this is not going to help them, that I got that they were hurting. But you have choices, and if you go down this choice, it's not going to lead to anything. But then I saw that same student at the Milwaukie High School football game that night, which they won. You want to talk about like a prayer? I mean, I literally I walked by like 20 different activities of different sports throughout the pandemic. And every single time, the scoreboard had a 0 and a non-zero, and they always had the 0. They weren't just losing, they didn't score. So then, they won. They were playing Park Rose, which is also a community that needs lots of help. It's hurting. And it's sad that schools and athletic events is often just a socioeconomic representation of their community. But anyway, I saw this student that cussed out the teacher, and that kind of took me back that they were there. But at the end of the day, I'm sure administration didn't even have time to see everything that was documented. And the student was there, and we talked a little bit about it, and it was tough to talk about. But then they said, "You know, I'm celebrating something." And I said, "What?" I said, "I've been sober for 3 months, and I haven't touched alcohol in 3 weeks." So they added that, because initially I thought sober, oh, alcohol. And then I learned it wasn't just marijuana, it was like pills, which is a big thing for teenagers now. And that is a perfect microcosm of this idea of we're called to love people and called to have empathy even when it seems like there shouldn't be any. And yet not only is it so difficult for that, but even when you find out the whole picture, you say, what can we do? And as schools, through the pandemic, the answer sadly has been not nearly what needs to be done. Because the resources at every level, if you've watched the news, if you've seen state budgeting, it's just been gutted. It started with the arts. I remember seeing Mr. Holland's Opus, my brother Shane's favorite movie, the inspirational ending where all his former teachers come back, or students. And honestly, I watched that back as an adult now, and there's some also very troubling things about that movie. I'm like, wait a minute, him as a parent, well, some other things too. But that was all about Oregon budget cuts and about arts going with it. And since then, it's been everything. My first day of teaching in 2011 was when they had 15 furlough days, because Oregon City, where I got the one job, I remember applying to 27 different schools. I remember at my wedding where Paul helped co-officiate, I literally said to Kaya, like, in some of my vows, like, and I hope to get a job to teach anyone out there hiring. Because it was just hopeless. Many of my cohort from Willamette, a university and a graduate school that closed down since I graduated. I call it the Willamette. It wasn't making money to compete with the law school and the business school, so they got rid of it. And they claimed it was because they couldn't compete, the teachers didn't need jobs anymore. And then you wait 1 year, certainly 2 years, and there's just such an immense shortage that at the time, all my fellow alumni and I were just screaming from the heavens, this is the worst idea. But it was made for monetary purposes, like many things. Has continued since. But you had most of my fellow cohort graduate school people never even got a teaching job because the first few years in that recession period, you couldn't get one. They were cutting everyone. Beaverton cut like half of all of their staff. They either forced moves against like their will. So you could have been a 5th grade teacher for 20 years, and now they're like, you're going to a different school, teaching kindergarten, and you have no choice. And so a bunch of people quit the profession that year, and those who stayed are still so scarred by it. Because imagine that feeling at the end of every year, not knowing, could this happen to me again? And living with that sort of anticipatory dread at all times. So this is context even before COVID, right? Even before COVID, a place like Oregon City, where I taught for 10 years. And I always say about Oregon City, it's right where Portland meets the Confederacy. Smack dab in the middle. Feel free to steal that. I think as a district, they stole that as well. Because it's true. If you go 20 minutes further south or east or in any direction, if you're in Estacada, if you're in Molalla, if you're in Canby, you're Colton, it looks very different than if you go 20 minutes north and you're in Selwood, you're in southeast Portland. But Oregon City is like the battle lines where those two cultures come together. Milwaukie is. And to teach during especially the years of the Trump administration was impossible. I mean, you would have 2 students or 3 of like undocumented parents with 2 or 3 LGBTQ plus students with 3 students who have Confederate flags literally on their trucks in the parking lot, and like that's their wallpaper on their cell phone. And you're trying to just literally keep the peace at a time where the Confederate flag people feel fully energized to bully and to let their way of seeing the world try and become the dominant reality, which in many ways has continued since. And again, this is all before the pandemic. And when that hit, it was like, and I'd say the story on a tangent about wanting one more day of a snow day. I said in the room to some of these really tough kids, I said, you guys fake drug tests all the time. And they do. They like get fake pee you could buy from stores. So that you get, it's a thing. And they brag about it to get out of their parole. It feels like, what do you, and I'm going to say this joke, why don't you even just fake a COVID test? Like, just come out, because at that time, if you remember, it was like Lake Oswego Elementary or something. There was like one school who had one person who was like, we're just going to take 3 days off. And don't worry, because the janitor never interacts with kids, so everyone's fine. And even at the time, I remember saying, okay, this is either the most overblown media thing of all time, or it's about to blow up. Because the reality of this didn't make sense otherwise. And the next week, it was, hey, surprise, you get a 2-week spring break. You never come back, everything's normal, everything's fine, just take an extra week off. And that turned into, we're going to call until like mid-April, but don't worry, it's like bonus time. You're not going to be responsible for anything you miss. They called it like supplemental learning. And then by the end of April, it was, okay, the rest of the school year is this distance learning. And of course, for teachers, you spend all this time to prep for these realities that then get completely shifted and you have to do it all again. And so you spend the time doing that all on computers, which you guys can appreciate. Those who are older teachers, it was especially like, what? You're not training me how to do any of, like, I know how to be a teacher for 40 years and I've got it down. I'm a master teacher, but none of it involves this computer, and certainly not these software programs that you're having me do all this with. And you're going to teach me over the computer? Just going in trying to train people safely, but again, I couldn't go in person. I remember spending, this is like such patience and love with one of my older, as an instructional assistant.
Be careful.
I spent, you guys can get maybe you like this. I spent an hour straight over Zoom, and the goal was to open a file. But it was a rabbit hole, because at one point she zoomed out and showed me her desktop, and everything that she had saved in her world was on the desktop. And there were so many thousands of things that they had stacked on top of each other, like vertically on a 2-dimensional screen. And it was like digital hoarding. And she was dragging constantly, trying to find like the one picture that she needed to open. And I was trying to communicate, okay, do you remember what it's called? Nothing was named. And so it was a great example of like, even from just a technological standpoint, people were screwed.
We had, so when everybody first started like live streaming services, the go-to that the Synod said was, well, use Facebook Live,
Right.
which there are issues there as well.
Yeah.
But I remember on like one of the first Synod Zoom calls, one of the pastors that maybe same demographic here, that was out in Eastern Oregon, was like, "But what cable do I upload to Facebook with?"
Yeah,
You're all sitting here going, "Yeah, what cable do you use?" And now yeah, just like imagining how you are supposed to catch somebody up in the space of an
Well,
hour.
because most of the time it's like talking in Russian to
Totally.
us.
Sure, absolutely.
Totally.
It's a foreign language.
And I blame it all on men because they know everything.
You know, I-
It would have made more sense. Do you remember when the
I'm
first
not arguing with you.
Let's not bash men.
When the first computers came out, textbooks were this thick,
Yeah.
and we tried to figure out, okay, how do I turn this thing on?
Well, and I've heard from, I remember my former principal, who was a teacher for 35 career, nothing changed. I mean, he, would tell me nostalgically about one of the machines with the blue, and then how it went to an overhead projector, but like the original ones with the transparencies. And then after that, it was like every year. And it really has been an exponential
And now they
technological
change it
growth.
daily.
Yes.
The year I retired, we had just learned in North Clackamas that we were going to be doing a lot of our memos as text, and you would come in with maybe 200 hits, but like 199 of them were somebody at the school that was selling his car.
Totally, right.
I mean,
It was just work for you to go
cycling
through.
This,
Yeah.
the memos you were.
Yeah.
We didn't even know about a lot of the things we're using. I mean, in 20 years since I
You're right,
retired,
it was 20 years.
things have gone.
20 years. And it's not just for adults, because for kids, you think, oh, well, the kids got it. They grew up with it. Well, if you've seen kids write, they write with the same text message language that they text with. And they know how to, do certain social media sites, but they don't know how to write an email. They don't know how to check email. It was like all of those skills just got skipped for newer
Because
generations.
their iPhone checks for them.
Well, or they just turn every email, they call them now iPad kids, but an iPad is the cheapest babysitter and parent that exists, and lots of people in poverty have no choice. But you can literally just give a kid an iPad from the time that they're a few months old, and they'll behave, but it shortens their attention span and their everything. But by the time they're in school, especially in high school, it's done.
But Dillon, explain what it was like when you got back into the classroom and who was at school and who wasn't, and how you didn't know who was supposed to be. That was to me what was so
Yeah. So through the end of the pandemic, I'm sure you guys saw, it hurts all the stories of, you have some well-off families, they hired private tutors, they had their friends together still in little groups, especially those who had parents or grandparents. Maybe you were helping your own families.
Learning.
Yeah, while other kids who didn't just played video games all the time, or they just did whatever they wanted for years. And so they learned all of those behaviors as normal. And people talked about it like they thought about the social anxiety part, like, oh, we know they're not going to know how to talk to each other after these years, but never about any of these other aspects of what this would be. And for me, I knew I wanted to get out of Oregon City for a lot of reasons, but when a Milwaukie high school job opened, and it was right when the school building, the brand new building was opening, it was on the football fields for 3 years, which is horrendous. I thought, oh, this is perfect timing. In some way, I'm glad I took it because every first year is going to be horrible, but in other ways, it could not have been a worse time. Because last year, to be a teacher, and again, if you've read it on the news, if you've talked to any teachers, I could say with utmost confidence that 99.99% of teachers either quit or wanted to. Even the ones who stuck it out, even the ones who are there now, they wanted to quit because the reality of what it was to be a teacher after the pandemic wasn't just kids who didn't know how to talk to each other. It was people who, and now our parents are gone. And in high school, the last full year of school they had as 9th graders was in 6th grade. It was in 6th grade. In middle school, even though I think all middle schoolers should just be on an island and have like 100 games. Just separate.
Where are the flies?
And I'm hearing people from Rao across the street say amen right now. it is also like a valuable sharpening of the tool or forging of the fire that ends up forming a lot of who you end up being. And when you don't have that, and all of a sudden you're in high school without that, but hormonally you are 14, with no parents around. Think of all of these ingredients like a machine and what gets spit out. Think about that, and then think what's like 3 degrees worse than whatever you're thinking right now. That's not as bad as it was. Because also, parents spent all those months, especially a minority of parents, the ones who wanted their kids in school, and it was like, they're ruining my job, they're ruining my lives. I think it started as empathy for teachers, and then it quickly turned to teachers and schools being the reason, the enemy to everything. They had their voices so loud by the time we returned that all administrators, for the most part, across the whole country, we're talking public school, private school, wealthy school, poor school, every administrator was like, we cannot do anything else to piss off these parents, which means every form of discipline last year was basically gone. So that machine of all of these students and where they're at, by the way, throw in these layers of, they're not going to church. A lot of these people think go to church anyway, but the purpose, if you don't receive love, and you don't receive any sort of purpose, we have so many kids right now that literally, it's like all the dystopian books you read growing up, we're there. We have groups of people who exist purely for dopamine, who Paul sees when they get older, and they're trying to transition out of prison, and they're the same at 14. They want, their phones are the primary reality. Not their secondary reality, their primary reality. And if you try and take this, you are taking away their primary reality. And so last year, it was, okay, we can't do anything about any of this. Let's not piss off the parents. Let's have these kids feel safe. And so those classrooms of students, those schools of students, there's that phrase, the inmates running us out. You need new phrases because it was so much beyond that. Whatever people wanted to do in the halls, whatever they wanted to do in the classrooms, whatever they wanted to do outside in the community. And in Milwaukie High School, which is a block from our house, we live right off Lake Road, right across from the Milwaukie Presbyterian Church, beautiful house, but it's like, we'd go on walks over by the food carts, of course the Max is there now, and students, not just 1 or 2, like 50, every day, all day, would skip school, and they would hang out, and they would sell drugs to each other, they would do the drugs they sold, they would have sex, they would fight, they would film those fights, and then I would see the fights back at the school. And the district was so overwhelmed by all these things that they did not anticipate. And had so many people quitting even at the district level. And I'm sure you've seen subs, no. Bus drivers, no. No one has filled any of this. Every day you get to work and you'd start with an email that's like, how many people literally don't have subs and the rest of us have to cover, lots of schools unpaid, in addition to your full job. And so you go down there and you think, oh, is the school going to do anything? Well, the school has the same 2 security guards that they had when the school was on a football field for 3 years. These are guys in their 50s who are coaches, who aren't that mobile, who yell things like, go to class! And then the kids run off the hallway and keep doing the same things. And advocating from the mountaintops to the district, through the union, through everything we had access to. We need more bodies. I remember seeing articles about activating the National Guard for hospitals and thinking, why isn't this being considered in schools? We literally just need more bodies. We need more adults to help students get to class, to help them when they're doing all these crazy things, to have some sort of safety. And then the end of the year, with all these situations, which is less than 100 miles from my hometown in Texas, among a whole lot of other things that I could talk about another day, it got so bad by the end of that year that I was like, no, I don't think I can teach it. And I had people, Angel here, who had a fund, sent me money every month for school supplies. Thank you. Right here, like that was huge, and that's a drop in the bucket, right? Like little things help, but it really is. You could double my salary. You can give me so much more money for class supplies. But if the reality of the job, these are 86-minute periods of 14-year-olds, 86-minute math periods, because I'm a math teacher, of these kids who have no motivation, who have no discipline, who just want to go and get dopamine in as many ways as possible.
Do you see those students weekly or daily or every
That's a great
day?
question. So last year, because it's block schedule, they're like, oh, you're transitioning from 40-minute classes in Oregon City. Just think of it as like a double lesson, which already for math is a bad idea because you need much more time and processing to do that. But I was like, okay. And they said, oh, but for you, we're actually giving you the lowest of the low freshmen. And we're going to give them to you every day. We're going to take away the elective they're supposed to get on the every other day. And we're going to give them a second math class with you. And we're going to have that math class be at the end of the day. We're talking 139 or 146 to 310. Good luck. Again, think of these as inputs to a machine. And what outputs, and then again, go so many layers deep. Yes?
Well, I retired many years ago, and I subbed up until March of that year.
2020.
And my 2 last sub jobs were canceled.
Yeah.
Because of COVID in Portland.
Yeah.
I didn't go back. I didn't
No.
do my license. I mean, I worked with special ed.
You and so many others.
And I
And who could, I mean, just from a health standpoint alone,
I
right?
can't do that.
No,
Not
just from,
how it was today.
and the need is so vast in so many ways. I mean, it's overwhelming just to talk about. You hope it gets better this year. It can't get worse. And you have seen a lot of schools like Milwaukie, because that's another thing. I took that job because I wanted to help my community. I was tired of going 20 minutes down to Oregon City in this frontline Confederacy place. I mean, it was nice to be able to help those kids, but it was so draining. And I thought, I have gifts. I think of myself as a very good teacher. What would be better? What would be better than helping my own community? You know, if I'm going to go home disheveled and distraught at the end of the day, I might as well help the people in the backyard. If, you know, show up to church. I go to church in the area. I live in the area. I can walk to school 3
Can you
minutes.
take roll and find, and is there anything that is there like there used to be when you would get a phone call if your student wasn't in school or whatever?
You get phone calls automated, but again, the parents, it doesn't mean anything.
They don't
And even now, we came up with structures before the school year started this year that it is embarrassing to say weren't there at all. Like, what do we do at all about cell phones? What do we do at all about hallways? What do we do at all about attendance? We literally had a meeting 2 weeks before this school year, not last year, to say, what should we do about that? And we're trying out policies and how to get that for the first time this year.
Is it working?
This is the honeymoon phase, right? But also, you know, you go down to 3 floors and you see the looks of administrators not blinking. They're back in it. They're fighting all the fires. The fires will happen. They've
There are
already
gonna
started.
be some kids who want to come to school and learn.
And there are.
I mean, what about those exceptions?
They're there.
Yeah, good.
They're there.
But how
But,
do they deal with it, with the other stuff going on? Or do
and
they
that's a
deal-
great perspective. You know, I have, fortunately now, Milwaukie High School is actually 2 schools, if you know this. There's Milwaukie High School, and then in the school is a school called Milwaukie Academy of the Arts. MA. It's a completely separate program. It's where a lot of people who do choir, band, theater predominantly are, which means those kids predominantly care more because they're willing to be in any sort of extracurricular activity and commit to that, so naturally they at least want to keep their grades up to keep doing it, and those skills often transfer to the classroom. Last year I got none of those students. I think the principal was just trying to get me to quit. I think that was it. Let's just give them as many bad things and they'll just
You're
quit.
young, you
But-
didn't have to.
Not as young as I used to be. 23-year-old Dillon, he could have done it. That's how old I was when I started.
Does this have
34-year-old
anything
Dillon.
to do with the article that was in the paper about how they're, to me, my language, dumbing down the requirements for math in high school? I mean,
It's all
that's-
connected. It's all connected. I mean, school now, it wasn't just they took away all discipline. Grading, it's now been determined that all the grading system that you guys grew up with was incredibly flawed. Because, here's the rationale. Remember F's? Remember zeros when you got a 0 on assignment? You remember what percent you had to get out of that F? What percent was a D minus? Oh, wow, 70. I don't want to go to that school. 60 is what's normal. And then what is it from a D minus to a C minus? 70, and then from a C minus to a B minus. And then, so it's like mostly 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, all different grades as you go up, and then a massive, massive bucket that is that F. And who gets caught in that bucket mostly? Poor kids, kids who aren't white, kids who don't have money. And so what the new system is at least make this huge bucket the same size as all the rest of it. So sometimes that's achieved by saying, instead of giving zeros, the lowest I'll give is a 50. But everything else stays the same. And that's what I did last year. But then you get the kids who are like, ha ha, put my name on the test. This is worth 50 points. This is dumb. Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot.
Understand why they're striking in Bridgefield.
Over the grading practices? Well, what it means is that you could get 3 A's, 3 F's, a C, or maybe no, it was 1 A, 2 C's, and 3 F's, and pass. Because mathematically, the same score that will now pass is the equivalent of a 22% in the old system. And because especially we want to like appeal to students' anxiety and their feelings, it's like if you come in and you're having an off day and you bomb a test, that's okay. You can take it again. Here's a new version. If you get a higher score, we're going to throw away the old one. If you want to take it 6 times, hey, the 6th time's a good one. Keep the 6th one. Hey, if the 4th one's the good one, but the other 2 aren't good, we'll still take the 4th. And you know what? Even if all that happens and you still fail, show up to summer school. For just 5 hours of work, we'll give you a whole semester.
Dillon,
How does that sound?
I had a principal, I gave one of the students an F because she did absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Principal
She
came after
called
you?
me into the office and said, we have to change her grade to a C because of her parents'
Sure.
donations to the school.
Well, it was a private school?
Yeah,
Oh,
it
it's a public school? They still
Yeah.
doing it? Well, every private school, that's 101. I mean, I've got friends at Cat and Gable and other schools, and it's like, same thing. The parents paying full tuition, that's it.
Yeah.
The schools can't do it. I mean, they cater to
You're
that.
going to pass.
Andy?
So Dillon, you talked about the grading system.
Yeah.
You haven't talked about content.
Theory, it's to learn, not just the soft skills on how to be a human, but maybe some helpful content. But what is the motivation to do that content? When you remove grading, when you remove attendance, when you remove discipline, you have some that are inherently, probably because they have parents who've instilled this in them, maybe churches who instilled this in them. People who have that intrinsic motivation, they are still there in some, but Milwaukee's got 1,300 students. If you have even 20, 30% who aren't, that's a lot of students. And those students are the ones walking around, going to classrooms, blowing up everything, going to the carts. And I keep bringing up the carts because part of this spiel is hopefully a call to action. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, well, what's the purpose of church? Obviously, a lot of it is to be a place that only we can reflect on our best selves. Like, I think about that when I listen to Jesse ramble on for a sermon that goes way too long. When else do I sit here and even just have time where I'm not on my phone, I'm not doing something? It's like protective time to even just process anything in my head. You don't, right? Like even at home, even if you're like you're watching TV or you're mowing the grass or you're doing something. And so even just that is like, well, that's really valuable. I've missed just the ability to have my mind like decompress from what's going on. And then I think about community, right? It's the ability to be with people, to have that amazing surprise baby shower with people with handmade quilts. I mean, what? That doesn't happen outside of the church. And then you've got, the religious elements as well, but honestly, for people my generation, that doesn't hook people. It's very much more like a social justice thing now. People don't go to church, but they will volunteer for a social justice cause. They don't see the connection. Part of the mission maybe is to show them, but not via a fear-based, guilt-based system that we have a lot of as well. And a lot of people, even really good friends of mine who aren't religious, are for good reasons. They've seen the corruption in churches. Maybe their family was abused by somebody in church. That has gone on for generations. And so what do you do for the kids now that have none of that and need the love, need the community that this place brings that they don't have? So that doesn't just mean anyone who could be a sub, just consider it. Look at that face. Bus driver, show up after school for 30 minutes with some cookies. What's your comfort level? Let's start there. If nothing else, what about just walking by downtown by those carts in the middle of the day sometime on a walk with a friend? Maybe get 2 or 3 of you. And say hi to students who are there. Maybe there's a craft that you can lead. Maybe there's, I don't know. I mean, you could try yelling at them and you want to, I know, but they won't listen to you. You know, or maybe it's, can the church be some sort of also advocacy? Because right now, this cart situation is falling through the cracks because we don't have the support, as I told you, 2 hall monitors for a 3-floor building, plus an arts building, plus the football field, plus the whole campus around. It's all unsafe right now. Surely they're not walking 2 blocks away. But the police, right? My friends who have the carts, including that wonderful barbecue cart, if you haven't tried it, that's brisket. I'm from Texas. That's like the best barbecue that I know. And it's 2 blocks, and it's not gonna stay there, because the cart person, Pierre, immigrant from Canada, who's been struggling with his own visa, that's his whole thing. He's like, I have to go somewhere else, because during the school year, this group of students forms this wall, and all of these adults and paying customers, they just say screw that, and they bail. And so these carts are all gonna leave if we don't solve this soon. I mean, he said December at the latest is when I want to leave. And I said, I will do everything I can, sir, to try and make sure that this becomes a safe environment, but also that you stay. Because I'm also invested in terms of my appetite. You are 2 blocks from my house. I don't want you to go.
Dillon,
Yes.
how is this different than before COVID?
Well, I was a Milwaukee high school teacher before this. I've heard stories. A lot of these things weren't here, right? Like the carts are only a few years old. But I will say, I mean, I hear stories of there being different places around Milwaukee that the students would sneak off to. And that to a degree has always been there. But what's different now is, I think, the way in which it is treated and able to be taken care of. It's like you've had all of the tools in the tool belt just removed. And some of those we're trying to slowly bring back, like these rules I talked about. But others, like the cart, they have videos of like literally drugs being sold, license plates driving away, and the police are like, we don't have enough resources either. We're not doing anything. And the cart goes, can you just send a Don like once a day, just walk through? Nothing. Talk to the mayor, Mark, you know, I've talked to, like, we tried, and still, this is one huge issue that falls straight through the cracks. And I know you've done some work for RAU. Bring that up. RAU is like all this, even exponentially worse. RAU, now 8th grade math is going to be Algebra 1. Starting this year, and Andy, you've read about this too, the great new theory is that everyone's going to take Algebra in middle school, not high school anymore. Because they're all going to be ready for it, and it's a good idea, and it's going to everybody to take calculus by the time they're in high school, and everyone can do it. Well, what do you need for that terrible theory? You still need great teachers at every level to get them prepared, right? I mean, I basically was a middle school teacher because those 9th graders were 6th graders. But if those 8th graders were 5th graders, or those 7th or 4th, you know, what? Every one of them but one, gone. Every 8th grade math teacher at RAU Middle School right there was either gone by administrative leave or by choice for almost the entire year. There was one teacher in the whole school for math for 8th grade that was even there and not a sub and a rotating sub the whole year.
But this-
Total.
But this is not new because of so many math teachers over the years. Why should they put themselves through that for so little pay when they have the education to get a high-paying job at some company someplace and they leave?
But in Oregon, at least, I mean, people want to live here. We know the cost of housing's gone up exponentially. Everything, it hasn't affected this area as much. It hasn't affected our backyard. But there's still so many subs 2 years ago when she was subbing that, like, you couldn't get a sub job often. Or you'd have to be able to, like, have the technology and be able to get in a perfect moment, like you're like the 4th call at a radio station to be able to get the job. Now, it's a barren wasteland.
Some school districts are hiring people that are undoubtedly even have educational experience
Sure.
as subs.
And that, especially in other states, like my friend brother lives in Oklahoma, like 90% of their new students or new teachers don't even have a license. You don't even have to have a bachelor's degree. If you're working toward one, we'll give you temporary 4 years to get some certifications together to go into a school. I hope that doesn't happen to us, but that's where we're headed, and that could be the reality.
But I know at this district anyway, did a bad job. There were a lot of teachers that retired at the same time I did, because there seems to be that cyclical turnover.
Yeah.
And they had stuck for years diligently, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden were told that they had to go take the test.
Yep.
And they had to give oral
You had to be highly qualified.
You had to write a, well, but they didn't have any trouble with the test, but it was kind of a smack in the face. But
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
asked questions like, why do you want to be a teacher?
Sure.
And they had to write.
So that's what I'm saying.
You
Like,
know, they had to write
yes.
about why they wanted
so the
to become
same
a
time where
teacher.
they had no jobs, I mean, it's
Right.
capital. All this is
And
capital.
so
right?
they were getting
They
rid of
had-
subs out of that way because they didn't want to, I don't know what it was.
Well, it's because when you fire 50% of your workforce, and then all of them become subs, now all of a sudden you can try and raise all these standards because the supply and demand, all of a sudden the supply is so short. But then you get rid of all these things that supported the supply, and then the demand shoots up. Like right now, how many people are retiring? But we're talking 10% of the amount of people entering teaching as there were even 20 years ago. And so I don't know what schools will look like in 5 years, in 1 year, in 10 years. If it continues at the same pace, I don't want to think about it. But that's the whole point. You can spend a lot of time losing sleep over that. That's not the point. Resources. And we have a community need that is like so right smack dab in the face. And lots of aspects of this are systemic things that are out of our hands. But there are at least small ways. I know many people in here, and it might take a little while to get creative, but can help. And I've thought about that for years. How many great retired teachers or retired engineers, anybody who did anything, and thank you for your service for the years you worked. That's probably a skill that you could teach somebody that isn't being learned, that maybe connects to a job that still exists, that pays better than working at Taco Bell or anything else. But we haven't built the pathways with community. And so they don't exist, and therefore all the students are worse off, and the retirees are worse off. And I don't know if Jesse wants to help organize this in some way. Either as people just go by and just, it could be bodies, whether that be people who can reach out to a school, whether it's a middle, like Rao Elementary, Milwaukie Elementary is right down the road, a high school. Hopefully COVID precautions now are making it where you could go in and do something, and that was for a long time what held people back too.
Maybe we should have our man.
Yeah, hey, I don't know, yeah, you can't like bring in money.
But are they having to do background checks and everything?
I don't know. I mean, right now they've removed so many obstacles, but I don't know what's still there.
It used to be that you couldn't walk in, like I couldn't walk into school, but I taught here for 30
Yeah.
years.
I know. And I don't know. I think if that's still in place, I'll be surprised if it is in a year, because just like we're talking about, we're not going to be able to have any of those because there's going to be no bodies, period.
Okay, I got another question.
All right, what you got?
Uvalde.
Yeah.
You have security at your school?
No! So we're talking about 2 guys in their 50s.
Nothing else?
That's it.
Nothing else?
That's it. We had a lockdown drill last year toward the end. It wasn't a drill, it was a reality. And a bunch of schools in the area had to go into lockdown because like a bank was being robbed, which also happens because it's Milwaukee. We have way too many banks. We can't get a slice of pizza or have an ice cream place, but we have 9 banks in downtown. You know, talk about mathematical. One of them's going to be attempted to be robbed once in a while. What?
Is it possible to work with any of the parents? I mean, like.
Yeah, so that's part. So what I'm doing is like I'm just going to every avenue, right? I'm going to the mayor, check. I'm going to city council. I'll go here. I'll go to the school admin, check. I'll go to the parents, everyone, because it is a community issue, and that as a community, hopefully,
And
we
they
can
have the
come
parents
together.
help, I mean, deal with the kids in terms of, hey, they're the ones that can help the kids say, hey, there's a role here for you.
That's what I mean. We try, but a lot of those parents, again, it's I forgot. I haven't been able to control that kid since they were, whatever, or hey, that's still better than they're behaving at home, and especially at the high school level. I mean, but again, elementary, middle, you have more volunteers there. There's a way of course correcting before they're 14. By the time they're 14, 15, again, Paul will tell you, like your habits are set, and then they end up being a lot of what you become. We can still work with them, but it's tough.
Rao's the target, because they're only 12 and 13.
Rao's a big target, and Rao's the one that probably needs the most. But I don't know. That's a more complicated issue. But an easy ask is this cards thing. Like, why can't the police, the politicians, the schools? How does something like this that affects the entire community fall through the cracks of all of those entities?
Part of its history.
True.
Because the history of Milwaukie High School is always has been open campus. In the whole city of Milwaukee, there always were students wandering all over the town. So it's part of that. Where Hawkins High School, which was the second high school, was a
But part of that's enforcement, right? You can say closed campus, but then if you can't enforce it,
I know.
and they say that with underclassmen, like freshmen and sophomores aren't technically allowed to go out, but they don't enforce it, so then it's a joke. And we talk about equity. You know, equity is huge, and it talks about the whole racial lens often. But Milwaukee is given the same amount of resources as Clackamas, as Adrian C. Nelson, as these other schools in suburban neighborhoods. When not just does Milwaukee have a different population, but it is geographically located in a space. You guys leaving? Worry, it's fine. No offense. I'm not taking any offense here. He deals with this all the time. You know? Thank you. Seriously though, thanks for your time.
Yeah, the placement of your school has a lot to do.
It does, but that again is a call to action that we should have resources that
Demographics,
meet.
though.
Like Milwaukee should have more resources based on its location and its population than Clackamas does, or that
Well,
Nelson.
because your demographics are so different.
Yes, and the location. And yet, from a school district perspective, it's, well, we want all of our schools to have open campus for upperclassmen. We want all of our schools to get exactly 2 hall monitors. And equity is not equality.
You're just, can I ask, I have,
Yes, hello.
you have monitors, they're not police people with guns?
No, they're coaches. No, there's one shared police officer between many different schools. And that's
We
it.
had, I taught at the high school, they were a police and jump officer. He was sent to the school for the year, and, you know, after, what was it, Virginia Tech, like our principal ever had a big meeting and said, look, you know, this is what we're gonna do. You know, Joe, who's our officer, you're gonna block up in your rooms, and he's gonna shoot, and he's gonna literally hunt the guy down and shoot him. I mean, I can't believe there are schools out here with.
But in the last 2 years, we talk about COVID, we talk about economy, we haven't talked about the social element, right? So then what have police officers been doing in the last 2 years? What have social movements been doing in the last 2 years? It's been to try and get rid of police officers, and so that has come into schools as well. So it's not just removing grading expectations and attendance expectations, and it's removing police officers.
Plus, police officers are leaving because they could, just like you can.
Yeah.
And then police officers are leaving. So so anyway, this is all obviously can get very depressing to think about, but that's not the point. We have enough to be depressed about. It's what can we do to try and help? And we, again, like this is a sermon. It's not like we have all the answers, and part of that, this might just be a conversation for a future process and you all come together and talk about it. You know, this might be, and it might be just, well, as an institution, we're going to try and connect with the mayor or the police and try and get somebody else to help, and it's very indirect. Even if none of you want to like walk to a school or walk down to parts, and I do encourage you again to think about that. Pray about it. Like, what skills do you have? What resources that can help this issue that's not just in our community, it's on this street. You can walk right down Lake Road and you go around, you go Milwaukie Elementary, you go Milwaukie High School. It's here.
Here's something to think about, because, and Dillon and I we have a regular meeting
And then 2 years.
It's been 2 years since we go to Killer Burger in Sunwood, and we sit down and have burgers and talk about them. But one of the things that we've talked about before is that what we're seeing in schools is also kind of a side effect of, so 50 years ago, when you guys were growing up in this neighborhood, I would argue that probably the majority of your friends and the majority of the families that you knew, if they weren't a part of this faith institution, were a part of a neighboring faith institution. And so, whether this is about religion, but the simple fact is that the way that you formed all in the same place, and there was a network of people that you knew through church, and so, all that to say is that when you went to school, you knew the parents of so-and-so, or they knew the parents of so-and-so, and so on and so forth. And that breeds some unhealthy stuff as well, which is that when you've got the family that comes in that really isn't connected to church, they can get alienated and ostracized. But what we're looking at today, and what Dillon was saying earlier, is that those kind of social networks don't exist anymore. The physical social network that binds families together, so that when, for example, so-and-so is working 3 jobs and really just doesn't have the mental capacity to make sure that their child shows up to school because they're worried about whether or not that third job is going to be able to cover the rent and the medical bills and the utilities, right? That there is a social safety net to help them. So we've got like several problems that are going on here, which is that social network doesn't exist anymore, right? Because what binds these families together? If it didn't exist before COVID, it sure as heck doesn't exist post-COVID, right? And schools form that social safety net as well. They form that social network, whether it's extracurriculars or parent-teacher groups or whatever. Food. Yeah, food being a primary resource that schools provide, which did not exist, right? So now we've got less social safety net, less social network than we did 2 years ago. Added on top of the fact that the institutions which kind of bound us together, like churches and other community organizations, that doesn't exist either. So like, Dillon is sitting here saying, what are the ways in which we can help? Well, we can't rely on these kids coming into our building anymore, right? That's been severed, and that's probably not going to regrow, at least in the short term, right? So if this is our community, if this is our neighborhood, right, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of stuff to deal with. But in what way do we begin to rebuild or to create for the first time a social network in the community that exists here, right? And that's a social network with kids and parents at Rao. That's a social network with kids and parents at Milwaukie High. It's all bound together, right? And we've already kind of got seeds there. Like, for example, our school program, Backpack Buddies, is a way in which we do have some beginnings of a social network. We've got a relational network with these elementary schools that we serve. I've been participating in communication and conversation with Rao for many years. These are just examples, but really what we're talking about is how do we, when a kid doesn't have a connection, right, to a church or even really to a school anymore, how do we begin to create that? And maybe it starts with simply physically showing up in the spaces that kids are at. And I will testify, it's gotten way worse, right? So pre-COVID, I would go get lunch at the food carts because it's fantastic to have that a mile away, right? And you would see 8, 9, maybe even 15 students during lunchtime. You get a few more that would come down. My friend Katie Pate, who's at Milwaukie Presbyterian, lamented that every once in a while they'd catch kids back in the park behind Milwaukie Presbyterian. We haven't been there for 2 years, right? Milwaukie Presbyterian only recently reopened its doors. Guess what's happening is that when there's nobody present in these spaces, it becomes a place for kids to hang out, right? And it's worse. It's way worse, right? You literally have, it's like having a wall, it's not a protest, but it's a wall. But I'll tell you, as a 40-year-old now, who never really understood how high schoolers or middle schoolers function myself, even when I was that age, it's scary and it pushes business away. But then when normal people aren't able to go and participate and partake in these businesses, it just amplifies the situation. So the question stands is like, how do we begin to be physically present in our communities in a way in which we can build relationship and build network? I don't know, but long story short, I think the conversation starts here, and that's the point of this, is that we have somebody who's on the front lines here saying, here's what I'm experiencing, and Milwaukie Lutheran can't fix all the problems.
Well, no, but I find that the default is to just get super sad and upset and quit, right? Yeah. I mean, people are doing that every day, they'll continue to do it. And I'm not wired like that. Part of the ways is how I grew up, part of the ways is like, I find Kaya and her family at an early age, and I got out of this extreme poverty. I grew up triplet, unmedicated bipolar single mom in New Mexico. That's my background. And I learned, thankfully, at an early enough age, after working my tail off to get to college here, nothing, that like, oh, this is what life's about, and I have my resources now taken care of. I've risen up to the middle class. I should be a Republican. Because also those institutions were really relevant to keep me alive all those years too. But I feel called to like make sure that I'm not just one person who's saying, not my problem, or I'm just gonna sit at home and say, ooh, this is terrible, I'm glad I'm gonna, not be a part of it. No, instead it's like, I'm called every day in every aspect of my life. How many people can I help in as many ways as I can help? What keeps me awake at night is thinking, all right, I'm helping these students in my classrooms, and I'm occasionally making speeches like this, but like, what else can I do? Should I, instead of sleep, like make a YouTube channel and then just like make this megaphone go across the country? Like, should I be calling John Oliver every night and trying to like get on his show and have a TED? Like, these are things that keep me up because life is short, nothing is guaranteed, and where there is privilege, I think there is responsibility. And I think there is an opportunity with that we can try, and that we can't just let things naturally go the course that they Christian thing to do too. That every Bible story is about just like stuff going wrong, and then how do we interrupt that? And how do we learn from it? What does a modern sinner, tax collector look like? What do modern people who have leprosy, who are called, not just the homeless guy on the street, it's these kids who might end up becoming that same person. Again, I think of Paul, who sees often that transformation of a post afterwards. Like, if we continue to turn a blind eye, we're just going to feed more of that pipeline.
I was going to say a couple of
Yes, sir.
social networks I've seen seem like they help and work for the younger kids that's growing up is scouting. That was always a good one I knew of.
How are the scouts doing right now?
What?
How are the scouts right now?
Boy Scouts?
Yeah.
I'm not real sure. They used to be
Percentage-wise, it's
attending here. They're doing a good job here outside. Okay.
Yeah, but how many people are in it compared to 30 years ago? How many groups are there?
If you come, we often meet with, well, during the little bit of COVID that we were able to meet, like with Tilcomb Choir and MLC Choir.
Yeah.
They meet on Monday or Tuesday night, one of the nights that we're here, and they're probably 12, 15, but there's like 4 adults with me too.
But also there's an outlet. Like if you are a former scout and you haven't gotten into it in decades, how do we get the scout program rebuilt up? Because if you double those scout numbers,
Well, I was thinking about the
there's a ripple
social
effect
part
there.
with the parents.
Yeah.
That really helps. And then sports is another one where if you have teams and if the parents, they kind of promote a little bit more of a social part of it for parents too. That kind of helps get parents together.
Sure.
And,
Here's another stat for you.
each other.
Milwaukie High School last year, there's 1,300 students. 7 of them joined the band. 1,300 students. We didn't have enough join soccer to have a varsity team. We should have oozing with people to join everywhere. But the culture now is stay home, be on your phone, be on TikTok, be on whatever. Don't join anything. Don't have the parents get the ripple effect.
They need those music programs, singing programs.
And that's part of their calling.
That's why John and Sandy Baker have done what they've done, because music was pulled out of the elementary schools. If you don't give kids enough music in the elementary schools, you're not going to get, and band teachers were almost non-existent through junior high. And if you don't get them through that part, they're never going to be there in high school.
So again, call to action. We talk about that forever too. Think about yourselves. What did you do? What was passionate for you at a younger age? Were you part of Scouts? Were you a part of a sport? Were you part of music? What have you not tapped into maybe in this organized way in years? That would also be revitalizing for you. Get connected back with that organization and help that organization grow. And if you even got one more person to grow that, that's a ripple effect that'll eventually.
It is.
Because you're exactly right.
Kids that do well, they have friends.
That's exactly right.
And they have influence on their friends, even though they may not be in scouting or they may not play sports.
Yeah.
They have influence with other people.
So that's my call to this group to think about. It's also, I gotta be full disclosure, this is the first week of NFL football.
Yes.
Early games will end in 1 hour. I'm like, I have 12 text messages.
I've got one thing.
What's that?
I had a passion for something that I could never get in, and I served 6 years on the advisory committee for this school district. I think that there should be home rows. We saw a child in the neighborhood, and we thought, had there been a home row, the teacher would have seen that this child was changing. And you go to home row take your attendance.
Yep.
What is going on at the school? This 20, 30 minutes at the
Every
first period of the day, every day.
Some schools have it.
And you go to that same homeroom, freshman, sophomore, and junior.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, this kid's acting like he's on drugs. You know it because you know that kid.
Right.
You don't know that child, but when every year there's some,
So again, we talk about where's that homeroom. If you're an elementary school teacher and you see the same kids every day, you know when things start to go wrong.
Yep.
If you're a high school teacher who sees them 86 minutes every other day, or a middle school
Yep.
teacher who all of a
Yep.
sudden has 7 periods and there's no homeroom. So again, where's that need? Middle school level, high school level.
And then I'm talking about, Travis is 18, I don't know. When I fought for this thing for year after year, and you know what the response was? Well, how are you gonna keep kids in that room for 20 or 30 minutes? So it isn't something that's new.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, that's exactly right, though, because if it's not graded, again,
Yeah.
grades aren't motivating. So like, oh, it's 20 minutes, it's not graded, I can just leave, do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking about this. I hope you spent a week thinking about it.